Hi, welcome to Lone Star College. My name is Trey Medley. I am one of the academic advisors at Lone Star College University Park, and we're just going to be walking through a few things that you should know, especially during your first semester here at Lone Star College. With that in mind, I'm just going to kind of show you what we have here on the screen. This idea of grad up that you see. If if we did have classes on campus, you'd be seeing this pasted on the elevators, several different places. This is about our commitment to you. That if you commit to work hard and do things, we're going to commit to make sure that we do everything that we can to help assist you with graduation. We want you to be successful. So more than anything else, we do want you to be successful. And just keep that in mind as I'm going through these different parts of this presentation, that you commit, we commit, and you'll see those on the top of some of the different slides that we're going to go through. First, to talk a little bit about how you can still get in touch with us. Hopefully, by this point, you should have received an email, or you should be about to receive an email from your academic advisor that's assigned for the course that you are in now, EDUC 1300. This is our student success course. It's required for all freshmen, and just about every single degree that we have, even most of the certificates require that as well. And so you are assigned an advisor for that class, and their goal is to kind of give you that introduction to what it is that we do with advising, to kind of do some entry level course planning. Depending on what your plans are and how solidified those are, we might be able to go a little bit more in depth than that. But we'll kind of get into who your kind of long term advisor is. It may be the same person, it may be someone different, but we'll get into that in a little bit. As far as advising offices, we are open all semester. We're actually open all year. We don't close down for summer. We do close for certain holidays. It's like we're going to be closed for Thanksgiving. We'll be closed for Christmas, that kind of thing. And we do have slightly shorter hours on Fridays and Saturdays. So someone is working from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday. Um, and then on Friday, there's going to be someone here from 8 to 4:30 or 5. And then on Saturday, there's still going to be people available from 9 to 2. Occasionally, we are open on Sundays during peak time, but that tends to be pretty limited. So in general, we're not going to be open during that time. During this time, even though the campus is largely shut down, you can still meet with advisors. We are meeting and assisting with students digitally, and that means that we're doing it by email. We can set up phone calls and different things like that. There's something called live chat that you can access through your My Lone Star if you need to get in touch with an advisor a little bit more immediately. And then we also are setting up what's called WebEx, and this is a virtual meeting software. There's nothing that you need to download. You're just given a link. You do have one required meeting for this class. We'll talk about that here in a little bit more detail. That required meeting, you should have been sent a link in that email that you received from your advisor for this class, and that is to set up that initial meeting. And that meeting does take about half an hour, and they're going to ask if you want to do that by WebEx or if you want to do that by phone. Now, WebEx is a little bit more visual, so you're going to have both the audio component as well as the visual. They'll be able to share screens. You'll be able to see them, look at their face, different things like that. Um, but we can also complete that by phone if you are not able to do it by WebEx. So those are kind of the different ways that goes. That is a required meeting. And like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Um, Hopefully by this point you are familiar with this screen. If you're not, I'm not quite sure how you've gotten to the class to view this, but this is your My Lone Star screen. This is going to be your main hub for everything that you need to do at Lone Star College. So what you can see here are a few different things. This is where you go to enroll. You can click this little Manage Classes tile right here. So many of you probably are already familiar with that. You may have tasks, or it may say holds or something. Not everything that's listed as a hold is actually a hold. Just keep that in mind. You also have your academic record. This is if you need to do an unofficial transcript or something like that. Your academic progress bar right over here. Our goal for each and every one of you is to get that bar to 100% eventually. That means that you have completed your degree. At any point, you can click on your academic progress to see what percentage you're at and different things like that. Coming over here, we do have financial aid. So if you have applied for financial aid and you want to update on your status, that's where you can look for it right there. And then this financial account, this is where you go to pay for classes. So if you do need to pay out of pocket for all or part of your classes, set up a payment plan, anything like that, that's going to be there. Over here, you have the LSE Online, which is probably the primary way that most students access the D2L page. I know there's an alternate login for that, but this is the primary way that most students do that. So this is going to be your main hub, like I said, for enrolling in classes, accessing the online classes, paying for your classes, getting your transcripts, finding out what your grades are. All that is going to be here from your My Lone Star email account. All right, let's talk a little bit about the EDUC 1300 class. So out of the 1,000 points for the EDUC 1300, 100 of those points are set aside for advising. And those are divided up as we kind of see here. So 25 points for the class presentation. Because we're not able to do in-class presentations or anything like that, this little video that you're watching counts as that class presentation. So watching that, and your instructor should be able to see if when you watch it, if you've completed it, that kind of thing, that will count for those 25 points. That advising session is probably the biggest portion of that. That is worth 50 points. So setting up that meeting, going to that meeting, whether it's by phone, answering your phone when you get called, or by WebEx, basically coming to that meeting gets you 50 of those points. And then the remaining 25 are actually registering for next semester. So if you register for class for next semester, you get those final 25 points. A quick note about number 2. If you fail to do that meeting, regardless of whatever else that you've done for this class, there's a hold that goes on your account that will prevent you from registering for next semester. We don't want that to happen. We want you to go ahead and meet with us. So please set up that meeting, keep the meeting. If you need to reschedule, we can work with you to reschedule that meeting. But you're not going to be able to complete step 3 if you haven't done step 2, because you can't register for next semester if you haven't completed that at one-on-one meeting with an advisor. So please do so. We're going to be doing that, like I said, digitally. So it's going to be either through the virtual WebEx or by phone. That's kind of how that meeting is going to take place. So some things to think about before that meeting. When you set it up, you will answer some survey questions. A lot of those are going to have to do with what are your plans either at Lone Star or after Lone Star. So start thinking about that now. So you can decide what it is that you want to do or what you think you want to do or different things like that. Or even if you don't know what you don't want to do, that can also be very helpful. Even if you have just a general idea, that can help quite a bit. If you genuinely have no idea what it is that you want to do, there are different resources that we can point you to help. So we do have a career services, and they can help with some career counseling, help you kind of figure out what it is that you are better equipped to do, or maybe where your interests lie, that kind of thing. If you just want some data and information about different careers and occupations, I'll point you to what's called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. It's something put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is a government body and it is not political. All they do is compile data. And they look at that data and they're able to analyze to look at trends so they can tell you what level of education you're going to need for different types of careers, what the median pay is. Median pay is what you should expect after a few years of working in that field. That's kind of the middle of the road payment for there. And they also tell you something like the job growth rate. So, for instance, the population tends to grow at about 6% in the US. If you have a job growth rate that is about 6%, that's a pretty steady job. It's kind of just going along. If it's below that 6% mark, you may want to just consider like it's going to be a little bit tougher of a job market. If it is well above that, sometimes they'll even say this is at a very high or accelerated rate of growth over the next 10 years. That means it's going to be a little bit easier to get a job if you have the appropriate qualifications for that job. So that's just another tool to kind of put in your toolbox. It's not to say that you have to follow that. It's just something else to consider as you're looking through these, especially if you're not sure what it is that you want to do. Hopefully, though, you can have at least a general idea of what it is that you want to do. At the very least, we're going to kind of look up here at the top first. Hopefully, you know if you want to transfer to a 4-year school or if you want to get a technical degree. Now, technical degree, these are what we sometimes call workforce degrees. They are intended for once you finish, whether it's a technical degree or a certificate below that, once you complete that education at Lone Star College, you are able to immediately start working in that field. So there's lots of different ones with that. There's a lot that we have through University Park in energy and manufacturing. We do not, through University Park, have any of the health or allied health areas. You can take prerequisites for those at University Park, but you'll actually have to take the coursework at one of the other campuses. But there's a lot of those throughout the entire college system, and this is areas that generally are in higher demand, and you can still make a decent wage doing those things. So an example of that might be welding. Historically, there's been a shortage of welders in the Houston area, so there are certain places where you can get welding certificates or welding degrees or that kind of thing. So those are just different examples of things that you can do. We also have transfer degrees, and Admittedly, this is what most students come to Lone Star for. They want to eventually get a bachelor's degree. So if that's you, you should be in an Associate of Arts or Associate of Science. It may or may not have a major listed with it. We don't have every single major. Um, but you're going to be looking for those. All of those, whether it's a technical degree or a transfer degree, are going to be situated within one of these 8 pathways that you see on the screen here. So these different 8 pathways are just kind of a general way to think about these different degrees. And you know how I mentioned that you have an advisor assigned for this class? Well, once you kind of identify or let people know what your pathway is, you're going to be assigned a specific advisor for that pathway who is going to be able to give you a little bit more guidance and direction about what classes, what order of classes to take them in, different things like that. So just quickly, we're going to run through some of these. We have like the computer and digital technology. We also have arts, humanities, communication, and design, business and professional services, health sciences, public safety and human consumer sciences, social and behavioral sciences, and education, energy, manufacturing, and construction, and then engineering, mathematics, and science. So those are the different areas. If you don't have a clear idea, but you kind of know it's going to fit into one of those different categories, that can be helpful. A quick note about things like dental, medical, and pharmacy. Those are not going to actually fall under health sciences. We're going to put those under engineering, mathematics, and sciences because that is a professional qualification. That's an after your bachelor's degree qualification. But most of those, you can kind of figure out which area you're going to fit in based upon what that pathway is. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit more about transfer degrees. If you're in a technical degree, if you're in an Associate of Applied Science, or if you're in a certificate, your pathway is really well set out for you. You know what classes that you have to take. If you don't know, you'll be meeting with our workforce advisor, and he will kind of guide you through what the specific classes are that you need to take, when you need to take them, that kind of thing. It's a much more rigid and narrow area. There's a little bit more flexibility if you look at some of the Associate of Arts and Associate of Science degrees. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. A lot of those degrees are built around the Common Core. So this is the Texas Common Core curriculum. And the Texas Common Core curriculum, the way that it applies at Lone Star College is an example of an Associate of Arts degree. You have these different categories over here on the side. Communications, math, life physical science, creative arts, all those different things. So they're listed over here on the side. So you have certain classes that you need to fulfill those requirements. So some of these, there's not really much option on. Almost every degree that is one Associate of Arts, Associate of Science is going to have 2 government classes that are offered as options for 6 hours. Those are both 3-hour classes. You need to take both of those government classes. So if you know that you want to transfer, but you're not sure what you want to transfer in, that's a pretty safe choice to take. Other areas like language, philosophy, and culture, if you're not majoring in English or philosophy, then you can usually take any one of these classes for that one requirement. Now, a lot of Bachelor of Arts degrees programs, I will let you know, will require foreign language classes, and these are the intermediate foreign languages. So just to kind of give you a heads up that you might be looking down doing one of those classes. Everyone's going to need English 1301 if you're getting a degree of any kind. So it's going to be one of those classes. Math, though, the core curriculum only requires 1 class. But which math class you take is very, very dependent upon what your pathway is going to be. So if you are going into education, for elementary education, there's a specific math class that you need, which is different than if you're going into business, which is going to be different than if you're going to the social behavioral science, which is going to be different than if you're going to a STEM career, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, or math. Those are all going to be different pathways. If you are going into a STEM career, you need to get started on your math pretty early because you're going to have a lot of math and a lot of science. You're going to want to make sure that you take those. If you're not taking them this semester, you take them next semester. Whereas if you are majoring something like psychology, well, you have a couple semesters to decide if you know which math class is going to work out better for you and which one that you should take. But when it comes to, say, with psychology, social behavioral sciences, you need to make sure that you're taking a psychology class for that. So this is kind of how you read this chart. We're going to get more in detail. In your one-on-one, your advisor will go into more detail about what the specific ones are. We're going to get a little bit more detail a little bit later on about how you read these different courses and what that means and that sort of thing. Okay. So the different pathways, just kind of give you a review of what we just went over. You're starting at the community college, so either you are going towards this, pathway study. It's going to be a university transfer, which should be an Associate of Arts or an Associate of Science, or one of the fields of study with an AA or an AS. There's also the Associate of Arts of Teaching, which is its kind of own unique degree, which is also a transfer pathway. Those are all set up so that you transfer to a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. Don't get hung up on the degree name. An Associate of Arts can transfer into a Bachelor of Science degree. So one of the areas that I advise are for people going into social behavioral sciences. Oftentimes it's our BS degrees, but you will be earning an AA degree while you're here at Lone Star College. That is fine. The main thing that universities are concerned with is if you're a core complete and if you have the appropriate lower level classes that count towards that major. That's what your meeting with the advisor is meant to do, is to make sure that you meet those two criteria so that your full associate's degree, all 60 hours of that is going to transfer to the four-year school. So if that's your goal, then that's where you should be at. If you're planning on going to the workforce, then we have what's called stackable credentials. So all of our degrees have at least one certificate, most of the time two certificates that stack into that degree, meaning that you earn these certificates while you're also earning the Associate of Applied Science. If after a couple years of working you decide that you want to go back and get a bachelor's degree, there have recently been some open pathways to do that. Now, Lone Star College, you may have heard, has some bachelor degrees. These are all in that BAAS category. We only have three, and in all likelihood, we are only ever going to have the three, and they are pretty limited and fairly small. So if your goal is to get a bachelor's degree and that you're planning on going straight through until you get a bachelor's degree, for most of you, that is not the right pathway to go. You want to go this academic pathway with the AA or the AS or something with a field of study, not the AAS. That's going to be something entirely. Associate of Applied Science is not intended for transfer. But we, like I said, we do have a few degrees in cybersecurity, in energy and manufacturing, and in nursing. These are, again, very, very limited with how many of those degrees there are. There's only 30 slots per academic year that they're doing for that, so keep that in mind. But there is a pathway to go into that. Also, some universities, like University of Houston Downtown, have opened up the BAAS for a few other pathway degrees as well. So if you are in an AAS and you decide later that you need that bachelor's degree, perhaps for career advancement or something like that, there is still a way to get there. Just know it does take a little bit longer for some students than the traditional AA, AS, AAT, or whatever it is going into the traditional Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. So with that in mind, we're going to move into how you actually read these course numbers so you know what these different classes are. So you're in EDUC 1300. Okay, let's talk about what that means. Now, this is the Texas Common Course Numbering System. This is what community colleges use. This is not necessarily what your university is going to use. If it's a public college or university in Texas, they do supply a list of what the equivalent course is. They're required to do so. But to find out how you read these different classes, we'll go through what these different numbers mean. So the first digit is going to tell you if this is a developmental course. We actually don't have a lot of those anymore. Now we have mostly what's called co-requisite courses or NCBOs. These are classes that are intended to support a college level class that you're taking at the same time. These are classes that do not transfer, but they do give you what's called institutional credit. So this is important for financial aid reasons primarily. So if you need those credits for financial aid reasons to make sure that you're full-time or part-time or whatever, they do count for that purpose. But they're not going to count as transfer degrees. They do not meet a degree requirement or anything like that. So, let me go back. So you'll see that with the 0. The otherwise, you see a 1 or a 2. Those are freshman sophomore level classes. You can take some sophomore level classes your freshman year. That's just kind of a distinction. We do not have junior, senior level classes at Lone Star College that are open to you right now. So keep that in mind. The second digit, that's going to tell you how many credit hours a class is. And we're going to talk about what a credit hour is and why that's important. So you'll see a 1, it's 1 credit hour, a 2 is 2 credit hours. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. There are a few 5 credit hour classes. Those tend to be in our workforce area. But for the most part, most of your classes are going to be 3, or your sciences and a couple maths will be 4. PE class is 1, and there's a couple other 1-hour classes as well. If you're in music, you're going to see a whole bunch of 1 and 2-hour classes as well as part of that. So that's kind of how you read that. The last 2 digits are just to distinguish it from other courses that are or have been taught. Okay. So let's start talking about credit hours and where that comes from and how that goes. So if you are a full-time student, the minimum to be full-time is 12 hours. Well, where does that come from? 12 hours is how much time in a traditional face-to-face class that you would spend in class, physically seated in the class, per week. Now, in high school, you could kind of get away with just going to class every day and then throwing your book in your locker and never looking at it again, and you could still get by. You cannot do that in college. Kind of those days are in the past. So in high school, most of your coursework is done actually physically in the classroom, and you may have a little bit of homework. In college, that model is pretty well flipped. So you're going to have a baseline structure given in the actual class, but then most of the work is going to be done on your own. So we recommend that you use a 2-to-1 ratio. Every hour in class is 2 hours outside of class. So if you're taking a 12-hour class, that means that you're spending 12 hours a week in class. Now I realize that this is digital, so you're going to be spending 12 hours a week digitally in class. And then an additional 2 hours outside of class doing papers, projects, different homework assignments, things like that. So that is a total of 36 hours or a full-time job. That's why we call it full-time. If you are a full-time student, treat this like your full-time job. It is not possible to work a full-time job and be a full-time student and have a full life and be successful at all three of those. Something has got to give at some point. So if you don't hear anything else I say, I want you to hear that you can't do it all. You can't be full-time student and full-time job and have a family that you're there for and all of that kind of stuff. Something has got to give. So keep that in mind. We use this chart as like a general recommendation because most students are working. And I don't mean most students in community college. I mean most students in America work while they're going to school. The question is, how do you balance that work with what you need to do for school? Because you got to think about your school, you got to think about your work, you got to think about study time that you need for class. You're also going to need some time to sleep. You can't make it through college on caffeine alone. You do need to sleep sometimes. And you have to need some kind of personal time or time with your family or different things like that. These are all different factors that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at school. Get yourself a calendar or a planner or use a digital one or something and put in the first time you come to all your classes, you get a list of when your due dates are. A lot of times they'll be in a calendar format. So plug all of those due dates into the calendar so that you are not surprised the day before that you have 3 tests and a paper due all on that same day, that you have given yourself enough time, that you've done a little bit of studying every day for the past several weeks, that you worked on your paper not 2 days before, but you started it 2 months before it was due, and that you've worked on it a little bit at a time. Because otherwise, if you don't plan that time out, it's very easily going to get away from you, especially if you are being like really hardcore about this, the lockdown and all that kind of thing. The days tend to bleed into one another. So getting a calendar and coming with some kind of schedule for when you're going to do what sort of work is going to be really, really helpful for you to be successful. So we use this chart. If you have to work, we understand a lot of people have to work. I would actually probably adjust these all by about 5 hours. So let's say if you were working 15 hours or less, then you can be like not just a full-time, but super full-time student. I'm talking 5 classes, up to say 16 hours. I don't usually recommend going more than 16 hours. It tends to be really, really heavy, very daunting. And you want to have a balance. You don't want to have 16 hours of all science classes. That's going to, just really, really tear you apart. Because even though that ratio I use of 2-to-1, some classes are not going to use all that time, but some classes are going to use more than that time. If you're taking organic chemistry, it's a 4-hour class, you're going to spend more than 8 hours a week on your homework. It's just a very difficult class. Same thing with some of the other classes. So keep that in mind. That is an average across all your classes. So if you're working 15 hours or less, then let's say take about 5 classes. If you're in that like 15 to 25 hour range, then you can still be a full-time student, but we're looking closer to that 12 to 13 credit hour. It's about 4 classes at this point. Okay, if you are working a 3/4 time job, so you're working like 25 to 35 hours a week, and this is where most students at Lone Star College tend to fall, then you're looking at like 9 to 10, maybe 11 hours, but you're really looking at 3 classes is probably the best way to think of that. And if you're working a full-time job, 40 to 50 hours a week, then limit yourself to about 2 classes. You don't want to do any more than that because you don't want to burn out really fast, so you're just working, 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 and then you never make it to the end. You never finish well because when the kid gets sick or when you're called in for extra hours or when you need the extra work and you're tired, the thing that's going to give 9 times out of 10 is going to end up being your schoolwork. We're a not-for-profit institution. We don't make money off your tuition dollars. We want you to be successful. We gauge our success 100% based on how successful you are. If you are successful, if you graduate, that is a win. If you take a whole bunch of classes and you fail half of them, and that leads you to getting discouraged and dropping out of the program, that is a loss. We do not want that to happen. We want you to finish what you start. We want you to be successful. We want you to graduate. So again, everyone's different. So this may not be exactly the same for you. You may need to take fewer classes with those number of hours. But I do want you to find out what your personal balance is and understand it's different for everybody. But just like taking too many classes can be dangerous, taking too few classes can also be dangerous because it can be discouraging to take 2 classes at a time and realize it's going to take you a little bit longer than 2 years to finish off your degree. So keep all of those different things in mind. You don't want to get discouraged. You also don't want that free time that you have to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which happens when you take too few classes. You want to find that balance where you are busy, but you're not overwhelmed. Wherever that balance is for you, that's the right number of classes, to where you're busy, but you're not feeling frantic, you're not feeling overwhelmed. You're just feeling busy enough that's keeping you doing what you need to do. And taking the right number of classes can help block out some of those other distractions that are going to keep you away from doing school. So keep that in mind. If you're able to take 5 classes, go for it. If you're not able to take 5 classes, that's fine. We've been here a long time. We're going to continue to be here for a long time. Keep taking those classes, plugging away. Slow and steady progress is better than no progress. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about GPA. Now, the next few slides, I'm actually going to go into how GPA is calculated. I know you're not taking a math class. It's real simple. We'll actually even give you some resources for how to do that. So you can search for how to calculate GPA. But here are some reasons why it's important to know what your GPA is. First of all, to graduate with any degree or certificate at Lone Star College, the state requires that you have a 2.0 GPA or higher. A 2.0 GPA is a C average. So if you have a friend who says D is for degree, that is wrong. You need at least a C. Now that's the minimum. Certain programs that you might want to transfer into or certain programs at Lone Star College may have a higher threshold, may have a higher requirement. Let's take teacher education as an example. The minimum to go into a teacher education program is a 2.75 GPA. If you have a 2.0 GPA, you will not get into an elementary education program. You need to have a 2.75 GPA or higher. If you are going into a very competitive program, let's say you want to go into engineering. Every engineering program is really competitive. You need to have a 3.0 or a 3.5, at least in your science and math classes, or you're going to be not their first pick for student. Texas A&M's business school is a good example. One of the most competitive business schools for transfer students. They only take 100 transfer students per year. 100, that's all. Not per school, from each school, and not per semester, per year. They will state very plainly that you need at least a 3.5 GPA to be considered, and statistically speaking, you're looking at 3.9 or higher. It is not uncommon for someone with a 4.0 GPA to not get into Texas A&M's business school. I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm saying that to know you need to know what your GPA is and how it's done and how it's calculated. It's important. Also, having a low GPA can affect your financial aid. If you dip below that 2.0 threshold, you may put that at risk. And it could affect your academic standing. If this is your first semester, you're a student in good standing. I hope that you stay a student in good standing. That is the goal. If you keep a GPA above a 2.0, you remain a student in good standing. Why 2.0? Again, you need that to graduate. If you have a semester where you dip below a 2.0, the first time it happens, you will move to what's called academic warning. An academic warning is like a, hey, heads up, last semester didn't go so well. Let's make sure that we focus for the rest of your time here. For a lot of students, that happens once. It never happens again. They never have that semester where they're below 2.0. People have off semesters. It happens. Okay. But let's say that at a later point in time, either the next semester or some other later semester, you have another semester where your GPA goes below 2.0. At that point, you move off of warning and you move to what's called probation. Once you're on academic probation, this is acknowledging that you have tried it and you have not been successful, not just once, but twice now. So again, we want you to be successful. So we're going to do what we can to help you be successful. That's what academic probation is about. Before you register, you have to meet with someone called a pass advisor, and they're going to go over a plan for what you are going to do to bring up your GPA. Because this is a 2-year school. For some of you, it may take 4 years. For some of you, it may take 6 years. But we are a transition school. We are not a final stop. We are a destination, or we are a stepping stone to another destination, whether that is another career or another college. So remember that. Because we're a 2-year school, and for some of you, if you're part-time, it may take 4 years or 6 years, that's fine. It should not take any of you 10 years. If you're going to class every single semester, it should not take you 10 years. If it does, something has gone wrong. Part of the reason that we have probation is to prevent that from going wrong. If you are already on academic probation and you have another semester where you dip below a 2.0, you then move to what's called academic suspension. Once you're on academic suspension, you cannot register for classes for the next upcoming long semester. Long semester here means fall or spring. So if you move to suspension at the end of the spring semester, you're not just out for summer, you're out for summer and for fall. When you come back, again, you have to meet with that pass advisor. They will let you enroll while still on suspension until you bring that GPA up and hopefully get off of suspension, off of probation, and back into good standing and move on to the next part of your life. That's really what it's about. Okay, so GPA, how do you calculate it? There are a few different websites that you can go to that will calculate it. This is an example of one. What you do is just plug in the grade and the credit hours. And remember, this is why it's important to know how you read this. That second digit at Lone Star will tell you how many credit hours a class is. It's kind of like how much weight that class gets. Okay? This is how, if you do it online. If you want to know how to do it in person, you're going to look right here. Or how to do it by hand, you can look right here. So we have over here on the left-hand side different classes, the grade points for that class, and just so you understand, A is 4, B is 3, C is 2, D is 1, F is 0. This is a standard way that grades are calculated. So where those different point values come from. The credit hour is how much weight that class is given. So for example, a biology class is 4 hours, it's a science class, it's a lot of work. That carries more weight than a 1-hour PE class, which you didn't necessarily spend as much time on or that kind of thing. So that's kind of where that comes from. So we want to make sure that we assign weight appropriately. So in this example, they have the different grades. They convert them to grade points. Multiply that by the credit hour. That's your grade point for that class. Okay? You add up all of your grade points, and that's your total grade points. Add up all of your credit hours. That goes there. You divide your grade points by your credit hours, your GPA. It's your grade point average. This is a way of saying this is your average grade per hour of class that you took, expressed as a number. So that's what that is. That's where that comes from. This is really, really important. If you glazed over, that's fine. If that doesn't make any sense to you, you can use the online system. But I want to explain the back end of it at the very least so you understand where this is coming from. And you can create your own in a spreadsheet or something like that if you would prefer to. But this is really important to know how grades are calculated, that kind of thing. Different classes, especially if you're transferring, will pull out different types of GPA. Your GPA will be listed like Lone Star calculates it, but they may pull out was your science GPA or your math GPA, or was your GPA if we don't replace all the grades, and a lot of schools do this. So you need to understand how it's calculated so you know what is it you're getting to, especially when it comes time to transfer, that kind of thing. All right, and we're going to start moving into talk about some of the different resources that we have. So one of those is a big one. This is free for all students. It's Microsoft Office 365. It is free as long as you are a student at Lone Star College. Yes, really. So if you go to office.com/getoffice365, you have to use, I think you use your My Lone Star email account, and I'll send you a link and you can download it. It is 100% free for all students at Lone Star College. There's a few other resources, but that tends to be the really big one as far as software is concerned. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about dropping classes and withdrawing from classes and that kind of thing. Every semester, and actually we'll come back to this. Let me first talk about the official day of record. That's going to make a little bit more sense. This slide will make more sense once we talk about this slide. Okay. So every semester there's something called the official day of record. For a 16-week class, the official day of record is the first Monday, or in our case, it's going to be a Tuesday, after the second week of class. Okay? So that's going to be the day right after Labor Day, is the official day of record. Okay? If you drop a class at any point before or even on the official day of record, that means your paperwork is in. That class does not show up on your transcript. It is a drop, not a withdrawal. Okay? It's like it never happened. You do owe some money. So, like if you paid for the class, you're going to get a partial refund, but you won't get a full refund unless you do it before the class began. If you do it before the class begins, not only does it not show up on your transcript, but you get a full refund on it. Now, dropping a class before official day could affect your financial aid if it changes your cost of attendance and if your your award is dependent on what your cost of attendance was. So do keep that in mind. Sometimes you may want to replace a class instead of dropping it and that kind of thing. That's not going to apply to every type of financial aid award. If you have questions about that, please talk to a financial aid advisor and they can give you more information about that. But after the official day of record, it does show up on your transcript. So if you recall early on, I said that you we're not that uh, we don't make money off of your tuition dollars. The way that Lone Star College works, the way that we keep an operation, is primarily through tax dollars, and the way that the state of Texas distributes those taxes is based upon enrollment. So you're not officially enrolled and not counted for that enrollment purpose um, until you are enrolled after the official day of record. After that date, you're officially enrolled. Again, that's how state of Texas determines what funds go to what schools and that kind of thing. They distribute from the pot. But you are officially a student after the official day of record. So financial aid tends to go out on official day of record. If you need a confirmation that you're attending here, that you're a student, that goes out on the official day of record. All that stuff happens on the official day of record. So that's part of what goes on. Because you're officially a student at that point, we have to keep a record that you were in that class, and that's going to show up on your transcript. It's going to show up as a W. That W does not affect GPA, but it could affect some other things. So let's go back in here and talk about the different ways it could affect them. So first, there's something called the 6-drop rule in Texas. You are allowed a grand total of 6 withdrawals during your time at Lone Star College. I'm sorry, not just at Lone Star College, during your time at any college or university in the state of Texas. You get 6 in total, it transfers with you. So that 6 is going to transfer with you no matter where you go. If you withdraw from 4 classes at Lone Star College, and let's say you transfer to the University of Houston, you withdraw from 2 classes, you're at your 6. You can no longer withdraw from any classes. So keep that in mind. You get 6 withdrawals in total throughout your time at all public college and universities in the state of Texas. Once you hit that 6, you cannot withdraw without some very particular exceptions. Usually, like if you get sick and you're on the hospital, you have to withdraw from all your classes. Okay, you can withdraw from all your classes. We're not going to be monsters about it or anything, but you tend to want to try to limit those if you can. Try not to withdraw if you don't really need to. Okay. If you take the same class, we're going to move on to what's called the three-peat rule. If you take the same class, let's say you take a class and you withdraw from it, take it a second time, nothing's going to change about the tuition rate. But let's say you fail it this time. So you want to take it a third time because you want to bring your grade up. So you take it a third time. Starting the third time that you take a class, for any reason that you're enrolled in it the third time, you are going to be charged an extra $60 per credit hour. Not per class, per credit hour. 3 credit hour class will be $180 extra dollars. A 4 credit hour class will be $240 extra dollars. So keep that in mind. You get $60 charge extra per credit hour on the third attempt and any subsequent attempt. So if you take a class 6 times, that sixth time, you are still paying the $60 extra per credit hour. If you are paying in-district tuition, this is almost double the tuition rate. So remember that, again, because Texas is paying for a lot of it, they're more fiscally responsible. That's why they have these top 2 rules in place. It can also affect your financial aid. The federal government requires that you meet something called SAP, Satisfactory Academic Progress. GPA is one component of that, but another component of that is completion rate. You need to complete at least 2/3 or a little less than 70% of all classes that you attempt. If you withdraw, that is a class that you started that you did not attempt, so it can affect your future financial aid. Keep that in mind. So always before you drop a class, we recommend that you talk with your professor first. I cannot tell you the number of times the student has withdrawn from a class and a professor saw them in the hall a couple weeks later, said, "Why do you withdraw from class? You were making an A." And they thought they were making a C because they didn't do well on one of the assignments. Then they try to get back into the class, but it's too late because they've missed 2 weeks of class now. We cannot undo the withdrawal at that point. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you are paying attention to that. The withdrawal date, which is the last day to withdraw, that will be posted on the syllabus for your class. And it's going to be different whether you are in a 16-week or a 14-week class. That official day of record is going to be different for a 14 and 16 and a 12 and an 8-week class. All those days are going to be different depending on how long the class is. So look at the syllabus. It should be listed there. If it's not, ask the instructor or ask an advisor. And we can tell you when those different dates are. Okay? There are some other resources that are available to you. I've already mentioned career services. We also have counseling services that you can get in touch with. These things are all available on the website as well. There's student life. Our student life is still active, even though it's all virtual right now. They've been having like virtual movie nights where you all go in and you watch a movie at the same time, and there's like a comment area that you can comment on the movie and different things like that. If you are a veteran, then there are specific services just for you. Same thing if you're an international student. We do have a transfer advisor that is specifically geared to help with transfer services and that kind of thing. We have tutoring is still available. We have virtual tutoring, our Student Resource Learning Center or Learning Resource Center, SLRC, also known as our library, has tutoring through that center as well. And they're doing virtual tutoring right now. So you can go to their website and get plugged in with different forms of tutoring that we have up there. You get Grammarly for free, which can help you with your writing, make sure you're not making mistakes. It's a little bit more in depth than spell check or something like that. So these are all different options that you have that are available for you as a student at Lone Star College. These are free. They do not cost anything, so take advantage of them because they are free. They're completely covered by tuition fees and what comes from the state. Okay, we're going to start moving into some different tips for success. Registration, which we'll open up a little bit later on. We want you to register early because you get the classes that you want at the times that you want with the teachers that you want. So register early. That tends to be better. It has a very high correlation with doing well in the class. To keep your seat, you do need to pay for the class after you're registered, but you have some time. You have up until a payment deadline to pay for the class. That will keep you registered in the class if you're paying out of pocket. If you're using financial aid, so long as you have accepted your award, you've applied for that year, then you should be okay. You can change your schedule after you register for classes at any point up until the first day of class. So if you are thinking about taking a class, go ahead and register for it whenever that date opens. So be aware of when those different deadlines are. They're posted on the website as far as when the payment deadline is and that kind of thing. For the spring semester, if you are thinking about taking a mini-semester class, those dates are going to be the mini-semester and the spring semester open at the same time. In the summer, there's a May mini-semester. Summer and May mini-semester registration open at the same time, so keep that in mind. For financial aid, if you are applying for financial aid, you complete a FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. That first F is for free. Do not pay someone to complete a FAFSA. Go to fafsa.ed.gov. But it is free to complete a FAFSA. It does need to be done each academic year. It becomes available in October, but because you need to use last year's taxes, most people are going to wait until January or February. Priority deadline. It's also called a scholarship deadline, but it's a priority deadline, meaning if you qualify for it to be guaranteed to be in place at that time, you need to apply by the priority deadline, is April 1st for the fall, October 1st for the spring. The October 1st deadline is if you did not apply for the fall. If you apply for the fall, that carries over through spring. It follows an academic year, not a calendar year. Okay? But you do need to resubmit it every single year. Some other tips for success. I've already mentioned that we have tutoring available through our SLRC. Check your email account, not just your D2L, but also your student email account. The minimum that college requires is at least once a week. I would say do this at least daily, at least once a day. Check both email accounts. Apply for stuff early. Start thinking about the schools that you want to go to now. You can contact them at any point and different things like that. So just keep that in mind. Communicate with your professor. If you miss class, you miss an assignment because something catastrophic happens, you know, heaven forbid, but if you get sick, like really sick, and that's why you didn't turn in an assignment, if you don't tell your instructor that's what happened, they don't know that's what happened. You have to communicate with your instructor about whatever it is that's going on. So keep that in mind, keep that communication line open. I've already mentioned register for classes early and that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers all your questions. If you do have any other questions, feel free to email your advisor. You should be able to get in touch with them. Um, and let us know if there's anything else that you need. And have a great day.